Hi, my name is Roz Chast. I'm the author of Can't We Talk About Something More Pleasant? I'm excited that my book is part of the 2022-23 NEA Big Read. This is a book that I wrote about my parents, and specifically about the last 10 years or so of their lives and my experience with taking care of them. And I was an only child. Uh, so the taking care of two elderly people, they were in their 90s. It pretty much fell to me. I have to say that one of the reasons I wrote it was because the experience was extremely surprising to me. This was a part of life that was so little talked about. On any level. I really had no idea what to expect, what services were out there, what other people had gone through. I had many emotions during the experience, some happy, some not so happy, a lot of frustration, a lot of sadness. Sometimes things were funny. And I'm a cartoonist, so I guess I tend to look at things from a certain point of view. And the book it's a graphic memoir. So it is told in the form of comics, but it's not completely that. There are some pages that are comics. There are some pages that are just writing. There's sort of, I guess, a scrapbooky aspect to it. I wrote it, it sort of unfolded in the way that it had to unfold as I was putting it together. I had a vague idea of how it would. I knew what the arc of the story was. Although actually, as I started writing it, one thing that happened was that I realized I wanted to put it more in context. So I needed to write a little bit about my relationship with them, which I think has a lot to do with how the experience of taking care of them as two elderly people went. And when I say elderly, I mean that my father died at 95, my mother died at 97. And the last few years were certainly much more drawn out and painful and complicated. And I know how horrible this is going to sound, but also expensive, and strange, just surreal. The experience was. So, I mean, in many ways, it felt when I was going through it a very isolating experience. I think because when I went through it, my parents were a lot older when they had me, and nobody I knew had gone through what I was going through. I was living in Connecticut and my parents were living in Brooklyn. And so we were not exactly neighbors. And I also had two small children at home. So it was a complicated experience from which I learned a lot. And I hope other people find it interesting. I hope that people find it interesting, um, that there's a little bit of practical information in there. For instance, one of the things that was very helpful to me was discovering that there was such a thing as an elder lawyer, which I had never heard of. And I hope that they occasionally find it funny, because there were some funny things. So I hope they find it an enjoyable, informative, comforting read, that if they're going through it, they're not the only ones. I think I've been asked a lot of things about writing and drawing. I can't think of anything that I haven't been asked that I want to be asked. It is sort of, I think a lot of people do have questions especially about being a cartoonist. strange misconceptions, and especially when it comes to the New Yorker, and thinking that, like, I've had people say, you have the greatest job in the world. You just do one cartoon a week and they buy it, and that's the end of that. And it's like, well, it's not really like that. It's there's about 40 of us that are sort of quasi staff. And then there's a lot more people who submit, maybe not quite as regularly. And then there's people who submit over the transom, and we don't submit one cartoon. We usually submit every single week between 6 and 10 or so ideas, rough sketches, and there's no guarantee that they take any of them. And the rejection never gets any easier. I mean, I've been doing this for, many, many decades, because I started when I was 23, and it is what I do. It's what I do with my life, and what I have done, and what I hope to do for the rest, because I do love doing it. But it is very stressful, and the rejection does not get easier. But I think when you're a cartoonist, it's kind of how you think, and it's what you do. And in most ways, I feel extremely fortunate, because I like to write, and I like to draw, and I like to make jokes. And that's what, to me, cartooning is. It enables you to combine writing and drawing. And that's, what I was able to do in this book about my parents. So I do feel lucky that I've been able to have a place where my work appears.